Hello everybody, this is Tech Dad Adventures. In this video today, we're going to be answering several questions that we have received in regards to the SDR-Trunk video that we made several months back. We'll start at the top here and we'll go through all the questions that we received. The very first one, the question is, does P25, which is also known as Project 25, work with SDR-Trunk? The answer is yes. It works with both Phase 1 and Phase 2 of P25. Now keep in mind, Phase 1 and Phase 2, they're both considered P25, but they are a little bit different with a little bit different characteristics. But SDR-Trunk does work with both. The next question is, do we have to run ZA-Dig utility for both dongles? When you're running two dongles, you will need to run that ZA-Dig utility for both dongles. Some folks may choose to run multiple dongles, more than two, and you can do that, but you will need to run the ZA-Dig utility for each of the dongles that you plan on using with SDR-Trunk. This ZA-Dig utility is what installs the driver for the SDR. It replaces the default driver with a driver that works with SDR-Trunk. The next question is, can I use the same outside antenna for both SDR radios? The answer to this question is yes. They make an antenna splitter where you can actually split the antenna for multiple SDRs. I've done some testing with this particular setup and I found that it works out pretty well if you're only using 2 or 3 SDRs. The antenna splitters that I have used have been for 2 SDRs only, and they split one single antenna and they seem to work just fine. I actually have my antenna in my windowsill with my SDRs close by and doesn't seem to have any negative effect using the one antenna on the 2 radios. The next question is, can I get by using a genuine V2 RTL SDR and a new V3? Well, I haven't ever tested this particular scenario, but based on my experience, I have found that SDR-Trunk is pretty flexible and works with many different SDRs. Although I haven't specifically tested the genuine V2 version of the RTL SDR, I would be willing to say that it would more than likely work. I just recommend that you just connect it and test it out. I've heard many cases where many different models and makes of SDRs work great with the SDR-Trunk software. I would just recommend just taking some time, connect them both up, configure them using the tutorial on the other video, and you'll find out whether or not it'll work. If you have any other questions about this particular scenario, feel free to hit us up and leave another comment on the YouTube video and we'll try to get back with you. The next question is, have you ever messed around with the SDR Angel? The answer is no. I've never even heard of it until this particular question came up. And if time will allow me in the very near future, I'll try to do some research on that and see what I can find out on that particular product. This next question, it's a pretty small question, but it has a pretty lengthy response. The question is, my laptop or computer does not recognize the SDR dongles when they're plugged in and connected. What should I do? There are several different things here that could be causing the problem, so I'll just run through a few of these possible issues that may be happening and give you some ideas on what you can do to maybe fix this. The first one is to check the BIOS settings on your laptop and your desktop and verify that the onboard USB ports are enabled. Sometimes we'll find that certain ports on a computer or laptop may not actually be enabled at all. That would be where I would start. Now, if you already know that the port is working because other items work in the port, then you can skip that step for that. The next step is check if your USB ports are version USB 2 or version USB 3. We have found out that the RTL SDR dongles and many of the other SDRs prefer to work on a USB 2 port over a USB 3 port. Now, it will work on both, but we have found that we have less issues when you actually connect the SDRs to a USB 2.0 port. The next one is first try bypassing any USB hubs, docking stations, or any other means that are connected between your SDR dongles and your computer's USB port. So if you're using a docking station or a hub of any sort, try connecting the SDR radio devices directly to the computer, bypassing that, and see if you get a different response. If that doesn't work, this may be a sign that your laptop or desktop doesn't have enough power available on the USB ports to power these devices. This is pretty common actually with older computers. In this particular situation, I recommend that you get a powered USB hub. Only certain kinds of powered USB hubs will actually help you in this particular situation. I will put a link to a powered USB hub that I have tested in the description of the video below, and I can verify that this particular powered USB hub does work with these RTL SDR dongles. Now, if any of that doesn't seem to fix the problem, I would say open up the device manager and check out the devices listed in there and see if you see any items that show up as unrecognized or disabled. If you do, I would actually dig into the reason that that is happening and see if maybe installing updated drivers or if there's a way to actually enable them from the device manager. And then the last one, use the ZADIG utility to install replacement drivers. Now, if you follow the video I did several months ago, we stepped through how to use the ZADIG utility to actually install the driver for these RTL SDR dongles. If you haven't already done that particular step, I most definitely would recommend doing that and see if that doesn't resolve your issue. On to the next question. And this was a pretty good one here. And so it asked, how did I come up with negative 3.9 drift setting on my SDRs? Well, I'm going to summarize what it says on the screen, but ultimately what happened was I actually got SDR-Trunk set up. I had messed with it for several days and started noticing that my control channel would never stay engaged or would never stay connected. It would connect randomly, sporadically, and then it would only stay connected for a short moment and then it would go idle. After digging into this particular issue, I visited a bunch of forums and a bunch of support sites, and somebody had made mention about RTL SDRs having to adjust the drift based upon thermal. As they warm up, they'll need to, they drift a little bit as they warm up. And so nobody actually gave me a specific setting to test out. What they recommended that I do was to sit at the computer with them connected and actually start making the adjustment 1/10 of a number at a time until I actually found what seemed to be the most stable. And so one day I did that. I actually started going up and down and started off going down first and found out that going down, when I got to about the negative 3.8, 3.9 range, my control channel seemed to actually stay connected like it should be. That's how I got to that particular number. 3.8, 3.9 seems to be the target for the version 3 RTL SDRs. And if you have any questions about this, feel free to reach out to me. But this one was a real tricky one. Without this setting, the control channel will not stay engaged the way it needs to, which means you'll only hear sporadic transmissions instead of actually hearing them all. I wanted to show everybody what the RTL SDR version 3 looks like. The width of frequencies it can listen to simultaneously is only 2.4 megahertz. It can actually tune in to many different frequencies as long as they are all within a 2.4 megahertz range. Keep that in mind because on the next screen, we're going to have some questions that actually will get into this a little bit more. Is each SDR radio limited to tuning to only one frequency at a time? Back to what we were just talking about on the last screen about the 2.4 megahertz width bandwidth there. Because of the 2.4 megahertz bandwidth, you can actually tune into multiple frequencies on one SDR as long as all of the frequencies that it's tuning into are within a 2.4 megahertz width of each other. No, it's not just one frequency at a time. I actually run 2 RTL SDRs, and at any given point in time, monitoring several counties in my area, I've seen as many as 9 active communications going on over 2 RTL SDR dongles. We'll move down to the next one. Will it work with just one dongle? Yes, it will. However, there's going to be some limitations. We're back to that 2.4 megahertz bandwidth. I'm going to address these. There's 3 major things here. One SDR can only listen to a 2.4 megahertz spread or bandwidth. SDR-Trunk pushes that to about 3 megahertz wide. I have seen it actually successfully listening to different frequencies within almost a 3 megahertz wide band there. But the software is making some adjustments to allow that. I'm not sure how it's doing that, but I have seen it happen. 2.4 is the stable bandwidth that they recommend staying within. SDR-Trunk pushes it to about 3, and it seems to work. Back to the question, can it work with just one dongle? Yes, it can work with just one dongle, but wherever your control frequency is on the band, you will only be able to listen to voice frequencies that fall within that 2.4 to 3 megahertz around your control frequency, because your control frequency is going to always stay connected. And with one SDR, that means any frequencies that you're going to listen to audio on, they have to be within that 2.4 to 3 megahertz range of that control frequency. As long as the frequencies you're listening to are within the 2.4 to 3 megahertz range of the control channel, you won't have no problem. I can tell you where I live, we have frequencies that range 5, 6, 7, 8 megahertz wide of the control channel. And so if I was only using one SDR, I would only hear some of the voice traffic going on, and it would only be the voice traffic that's falling within that 2.4 to 3 megahertz wide from my control channel. Moving down to the second part, I'll say that SDR will work with just one SDR. However, just one SDR, it will really limit the amount of frequencies you can tune in at one time to just that 2.4, 3.0 megahertz range. Setting up multiple SDRs, what it's going to do, it's going to give you the ability to actually tune into a whole nother 2.4 to 3 megahertz wide range that is not dependent on the range of the control frequency. So the control frequency will tie up SDR1 the whole time. And so any other frequencies that it listens to will be within that 2.4 to 3 megahertz range of its control frequency. But if something goes outside of that 2.4 to 3 megahertz range, that's where a second and third SDR dongle will come into play. They know to pick those frequencies up, and they will actually handle that traffic. Adding multiple SDRs is just going to add more flexibility and a higher probability of catching more of the voice traffic. Moving on, I'm just wondering why the need for 2 SDR devices. Well, I pretty much already covered that in the previous question, but basically the more SDRs you have, the more width you have the ability of covering. Can I put a conventional frequency mixed with a control frequency? I'm not really sure what the viewer was asking here, so I'm going to make some assumptions. And I hate to do that, but based off of some of the other conversations that was going on the channel, the wording is a little confusing, but I believe what's actually being asked is whether or not you can monitor an analog frequency and a control frequency at the same time. The answer is yes. One SDR can monitor different things. It really depends on whether or not they are within that 2.4 megahertz to 3 megahertz width of the single SDR, but SDR-Trunk's pretty flexible. It can support multiple modes such as AM, DMR, narrowband FM, P25 phase 1, P25 phase 2, and a few other modes not listed here. The answer is yes. I think you can tune into a P25 control frequency and also monitor an analog frequency. But the catch is, if you have one SDR, it will need to be within that 2.4 to 3 megahertz range from each other as far as frequencies are concerned. If you have multiple SDRs, you shouldn't have a problem. Moving on to the next question, will this scan MS-WIN P25 phase 2? At first, I didn't know what MS-WIN was, so I had to go look it up. I live in Texas, and we have what we call the Texas WARN system, and after doing a little reading, I figured out that the MS-WIN system is pretty much y'all's version of our TX-WIN system. Looking into it, from what I can tell, the majority of the radio traffic there seems like it is not encrypted or secured with encryption keys, which means it is open to the public to listen to. And based on that fact, you should be able to listen to it with SDR-Trunk. This one's going to be a little bit lengthy too, but I wanted to clear up a couple of misconceptions. I just mentioned encryption on the last question, and we're going to get into that a little bit. We had a viewer who had some very specific questions regarding P25, encryption, and how it all worked, so I'm going to try to answer some of his questions one by one. We had a viewer who had some very specific questions regarding P25, encryption, and how it all works, so I'm going to try to answer some of those questions one by one. In my original SDR-Trunk setup video, around the 38-minute 57 mark, I talked about not being able to listen to encrypted communications. This particular viewer asked a question what I meant, as he was under the impression that all P25 traffic was encrypted, thus the reason why digital trunking scanners could not pick up P25 Phase 2. P25 is not encrypted radio traffic. P25 is a standard for how radio traffic is handled in a digital manner over the air. P25 also has support for text messaging as well as encryption, since all the traffic is digital. Because it's digital, it's easier to encrypt it. Doesn't necessarily mean it is encrypted, but it has that as an option. All P25 data is not encrypted by default. Just when you hear somebody talking about P25, you don't automatically have to think it's encrypted, because that's not always the case. However, some agencies, public safety entities, emergency services, or even other cities or states may choose to enforce custom encryption keys, so that it limits or secures their traffic. And in that scenario, that's when a standard digital trunking scanner will not be able to hear them. In this particular situation, you won't be able to hear any of those channels or any of that traffic with a regular scanner, including the SDR-Trunk software or any other SDR softwares. To be able to hear encrypted traffic that has custom encryption keys like that, you'll need to actually have the encryption key to put on your radio to be able to decode that traffic. And in most cases, there are a few exceptions, but in most cases, the agencies or entities that are enforcing this encryption on their radios, they generally don't hand the encryption keys out to the public. In some scenarios, they will set up scanners for news outlets and different things like that, but the organization which has those radios and the encryption keys is the ones actually setting up those scanners for those other external entities. When you hear somebody talking about P25 voice traffic, you don't have to automatically think it's encrypted. It's not encrypted by default. It's something that is an option that can be leveraged on it, but it doesn't mean that all P25 traffic is encrypted. You can listen to P25 digital traffic over the air using a digital scanner that works with P25 Phase 1 and Phase 2. But the catch is it's only going to be able to listen to the channels that are not encrypted with those custom encryption keys. As we continue to move forward in the digital age, things are becoming encrypted for security purposes. And even where I live, the majority of all the emergency stations are free to listen to over the air, and they are P25. However, some of the SWAT and tactical and other special portions of these agencies, they will actually leverage encryption to prevent those communications from being intercepted over the air. The same viewer had asked, why can't I hear the P25 traffic with my older trunking scanner? I thought it was because the P25 traffic was encrypted. It's most likely because the trunking scanner that you have is analog and P25 is digital. To hear digital traffic requires that you have a digital scanner. So you will need a digital scanner. To hear unencrypted P25 radio traffic, you'll need a digital scanner that works with Phase 1 and Phase 2. You'll only be able to hear the unencrypted P25 radio traffic. And P25 Phase 1 and Phase 2 are not the same. To hear each one will require that you have a scanner that supports each one. A P25 Phase 2 scanner will not hear a Phase 1 channel unless it also supports Phase 1. The viewer then stated, I thought the reason I couldn't hear P25 channels on my Uniden SD 200, our Baofeng, was because it was all encrypted. No, that's not the case. The reason is because those are analog and you're trying to listen to digital traffic. You're going to need a digital radio to be able to listen to digital traffic. What I want to do now is give a few recommendations that I put together now that I've been using SDR-Trunk for a little while. Number one, most important, if your public safety, city, state, or emergency service entities use P25 for communications, you need to find out whether or not they are using encryption before you ever get started. So find out if those entities in your area are using encrypted P25 or if it's open. If it's encrypted, don't even go through the process of setting up SDR-Trunk to listen to that because it does not have the ability to do that. Set up the software with the most basic settings first. That's what I did in the instructional video. I went through, set up the basics which were required to use the product, and then over a period of time, I went through and started exploring and finding other features and whatnot in the software. Use the software for a couple of weeks while learning the interface before attempting to use the more advanced features. The software does stuff like being able to broadcast over Broadcastify and stream the audio feeds and stuff like that. However, I would recommend getting familiar with the actual interface first before you get into all that. Recommend connecting the SDR dongles to USB 2.0 ports instead of USB 3.0 ports. Seems to give you less problems and seems to be more stable, and when you're using the ZA Dig utility, it gives you less problems there as well. I highly recommend using a powered USB hub if you're having any issues with the SDR dongles not connecting to the computer. The power from the powered USB hub will assist with any issues you may be having with the SDR dongles not being seen or recognized by your computer. If you are using a slower computer with limited system resources, try turning off the waterfall. That may actually help the SDR-Trunk software run a little bit more stable and efficiently for you. And then the very last one here is sign up for a Radio Reference Premium account. SDR-Trunk has the ability to connect to your Radio Reference account to actually import your site information regarding the area you live, so you can pull in the radio identification tags and stuff like that. It most definitely makes it a lot easier to see who's talking once you get P25 traffic working. It makes it super easy to see who's talking. It also makes it easy to know which frequencies you want to set up as your control frequencies as well. So I highly recommend using a Radio Reference Premium account. That being said, that's pretty much all the information I wanted to cover in this video. We appreciate you hanging out with us today while we answered all these questions regarding the SDR-Trunk installation and the SDR-Trunk software. If you found this video and have not set up SDR-Trunk software yet, I recommend that you go and watch my SDR-Trunk how-to video on how to get it set up and configured. You can find that here on my YouTube channel, and it's highly recommended. It's fairly easy to set up compared to a few of the other similar types of software. I find that SDR-Trunk is a lot more user-friendly and a lot more stable than some of the other software products for monitoring over-the-air emergency communications. In the original video I discussed about using SDR-Trunk for P25. However, please note that you can use SDR-Trunk for other systems as well. P25 is where the big focus is right now, but you can actually monitor analog frequencies on this thing as well. If you have not already subscribed, there's no better time than now to click that subscribe button. We appreciate your support. In the description of the video below, we have placed some links to different products used to get the SDR-Trunk system working. These are Amazon affiliate links which help support our channel. If anybody has any questions, please feel free to leave a comment and we'll try to get back with you as soon as possible. Thanks for checking out the Tech Dad Adventures YouTube channel. We've enjoyed spending time with you here today and hope that you'll check us back very soon. Have a great day.